Hey everybody, my name is Will and this is Idiot Proof Cooking. If you're new to the channel, I make simple and easy to follow recipes that make just awesome food that I would consider are idiot proof, because hey, if an idiot like me can make them, you certainly can. If you're a return viewer, you know the drill. Now, with the weather turning gray, it's getting cold, fall is upon us, I find I've been making more hearty dishes for dinners lately. I mean, that seems pretty commonplace in the fall. I think most people do that. So with that in mind, I decided to make some shepherd's pie today. This is a staple piece in our house. Like, I absolutely love making shepherd's pie. It's so easy to make, and it's just, you know, like, it's really rich and it's filling and it's just so good. Now, I have a couple different ways that I make it, but generally speaking, you know, the ingredients usually stay roughly the same. So without any further ado, let's get into it and I'll show you how to make some really awesome shepherd's pie. Okay, so let's make some shepherd's pie. Now, one of the key ingredients, not the only ingredient obviously, but one of the key ingredients of shepherd's pie is the potatoes, because the top layer of the pie is mashed potatoes. So I have here about 3.5 pounds of red potatoes. Now, you don't have to use red ones. You can use Yukon Golds or Russets or really whatever kind of potato that floats your boat, but really the process is the same. Skin them all and then cut them up into cubes to make it easier to boil and cook them. So that's what I'm going to do here. As you can see, I have them all skinned and diced up, and I've thrown them in this pot here. So what I'm going to do is fill this with water and boil the potatoes for about 7 to 10 minutes until they're cooked. Now you can tell your potatoes are cooked by either inserting like a knife or a fork, and they go through the potato without any resistance. Now, while the potatoes are cooking, let's talk about the vegetables we're going to use. 2 stalks of celery, a large white onion, and I'm using 6 small carrots here, and they're these really cool multicolored ones, the purple, like yellow and orange ones. I saw those in the grocery store, and I was like, I've got to try those in my shepherd's pie. So really, just dice these all up, because you're making a mirepoix, essentially, you know, of carrots, celery, and onions. So you're going to dice them up into pretty small sized pieces, like pretty fine pieces. So start off with the onion and dice it up, and then I'm going to throw it into my bowl here, carefully, not to spill it all over the floor like I've done in the past. Move on to the carrots. Now you can obviously use regular carrots if you want. I just saw these multiple colored ones in the grocery store and I was like, oh, I have to use these. I think they're gonna look great. So dice them up finally like you did with the onion, and then again throw them into your bowl. There we go. Now, last but not least, the celery. So I'm cutting them down the center and then just dicing them up into fine bits like I did with the onions and the carrots. Lastly, wouldn't you know, I'm throwing it into the bowl with the rest of them, and there we go. We've got our vegetables for the shepherd's pie. Now let's go into the kitchen and take care of these potatoes. So they've been boiling for about 10 minutes now, and as you can see here, I am inserting my fork into them and it's going through without any resistance. That means they're done. So let's kill the heat and drain these, because now it's time to mash them. So I'm going to use just a plain old hand masher to mash these. You can use a potato ricer, really doesn't matter as long as they're mashed and there's not any large clumps in them. And then I'm going to add in 8 tablespoons of salted butter. Now I'm not sure about you, but I like my mashed potatoes to be pretty creamy and rich and buttery, so I think 8 tablespoons is the way to go here. I'm just going to quickly mix that in and then add in a pinch of kosher salt and some white pepper. Now you can use black pepper if you want, but then it'll show like the black flecks in there, so I'm decided to use white pepper. And then I'm going to add in a cup of whole milk, again to make the potatoes nice and rich and fluffy, and then I'm just going to mix that all together. Let's give it a quick taste test here, and oh yeah, those are some tasty, tasty mashed potatoes. Alright, now that they've been dealt with, let's deal with the innards of this shepherd's pie. Get yourself a 12-inch cast iron skillet, throw on a medium heat, and put some olive oil into the pan, because now we're going to fry our meat. Now I've got 2.5-ish pounds of ground lamb. Now you can use ground beef if you want, either works fine. Technically if you use ground beef that makes it a cottage pie, but it really doesn't matter, both taste good. I've decided to use ground lamb in this case. Now, pretty straightforward, you're going to just fry this until it's cooked, so just keep cooking until it's completely browned through. I mean, that's really straightforward, right? You know how to cook ground beef, right? But anyways, once it is cooked, it's time to start adding in your vegetables, starting off with the onions you've diced up nice and finely. So pour those in with the ground lamb and mix them together. Now you're going to let the onions cook for about 2 2 to 3 minutes until they become nice and aromatic and they start going translucent. And then once that's done, it's time to add in your carrots and celery. And then in a similar process to the onions, mix them all in with everything and let them cook for, you know, like 3 to 5 minutes until they become nice and like fragrant with everything else. Now at this point in time, it already smells amazing, but we do have a few other things we have to add in. Next in is some garlic. I'm going to use 4 cloves of freshly crushed garlic. You can use less or more depending on if you like garlic or not. But once the garlic is in, mix that around and let it, you know, cook for about a minute with everything else. Stir it all around, and then it's time to add in some tomato paste. Now I'm going to use a whole 6-ounce can of tomato paste, and I'm again just going to mix that in. There's going to be a lot of mixing at this point in time. Basically, whenever you add an ingredient in, you're going to mix it in. Once that's done, it's time to add in some spices. Now I'm starting off with some fresh rosemary, about a half tablespoon of it. Now you can use the dried rosemary. I mean, I just had fresh rosemary in my fridge, so that's what I used, but dried stuff works just fine. And then I'm going to add in a tablespoon of dried thyme, sprinkle that all over, and then I'm going to add in a tablespoon of dried parsley. Similar to the rosemary, use the fresh stuff if you have it. Dried stuff is fine too. Then I'm going to add in a pinch of kosher salt, and then a couple twists of freshly ground black pepper just for taste. Then, wouldn't you know it, I'm going to mix this all together. I feel like I've said that a few times during this video. Next in is a cup of beef stock, either homemade or the box stuff, either works fine. A half tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, and then I'm going to use a half cup of dry red wine, specifically Cabernet Sauvignon. And then I'm going to mix this all together. Do you ever say something in your head over and over again until it loses all meaning? I'm almost at that point. But then I'm going to add in a cup of frozen peas and mix it together with everything else. Once the peas are in, it's time to thicken this all up so it's a nice thick and rich gravy-like consistency. So I'm going to add in 2-ish tablespoons of all-purpose flour and mix it in with everything else. And as you can see here, it thickens up quite nicely. Like, look at that. It's nice and thick, and it just smells amazing at this point in time. So really, there's not much left to do short of putting the mashed potatoes on top and baking this. So let's go get those mashed potatoes we made and throw them on top. It's pretty straightforward. Pour them on top and then get a spoon or fork or whatever and smooth them out so you have a nice like top layer of mashed potatoes on top of your whole meat and vegetable mixture. Look at that. And then I'm going to grate a bunch of Parmesan cheese on top of it, because shepherd's pie is way better when you have a bunch of Parmesan cheese on the top of it. And then I'm going to throw it in a preheated oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit and bake it for about 20-25 minutes until it comes out nice and golden brown and the Parmesan cheese is melted. Look at that. Look at how good that looks. Oh man. It's very hot at this point in time, like very hot. So I'm going to let it cool down for like 5 to 10 minutes before I get into this, because as you can see here, it is piping hot at this point in time. Okay, and here we go. Let's go in for a taste test. I'm pretty pumped to try this. Like, the smells coming off of it are amazing. And I'm not sure if you can tell or not. Like, I'm not sure if you can see the steam, but it's still actually pretty piping hot. So even after letting it cool for 10 minutes, it's still like super hot. But anyways, let's go in for a taste test. I'm pretty excited to try this. This is like one of my favorite, like I said, like a staple piece in my household. So here we go. First bite, and oh man, that is so good. It's so good. The ground lamb gives it a nice little gaminess to it. Like, don't get me wrong, ground beef is good in this as well. But the ground lamb is just a little bit of a different flavor that is just perfect. And there's so many rich flavors in this, like with the vegetables and the red wine and the beef stock in it. It is just honestly so delicious, and it's a perfect fall time recipe because it's hearty, and after a cold day it's like nice and filling, and it'll just warm you up from the inside. Oh man, there's a reason why this is a staple piece in my house, because it's just so good. Just so good and so easy to make too. Like, try making this at home. I think you'll really like it. But anyways, that is the end of the episode. If you like what you saw here, why don't you drop me a comment, like the video, or even subscribe to the channel. Thanks again for watching Idiot Proof Cooking. We'll see you again soon.